Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and we welcome you to this webinar which is brought to you by InspireOne. We'd like to thank you for attending this session. We hope that you find it very relevant. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some quick logistical items. Since this is a listen-only webinar, please feel free to type your questions in the chat area, and we'll do our best to address all the questions towards the end of the webinar. In case you drop out or you must have to leave for any reason, you can view a recorded version of the webinar which would be shared to you as in a follow-up email. In case you'd like to copy of the presentation, please write to us at info@inspireone.in and we'll be happy to email it to you or send you a link where you can download the deck. Our webinar today is on the topic, how can digital learning boost sales performance? And our guest speakers for the day are Shahshin Bodawala and Kartik Mohla. Shahshin has grown through the ranks in sales, managing businesses such as cardiology, diabetes, neurology, urology, and critical care. In his last role, he helped in developing a profitable business from scratch, launching and building the organization into the fastest growing pharmaceutical company in India. Kartik comes in with more than 11 years of diversified professional experience spanning investment banking, HR consulting, and technology across North America, Europe, and Asia. He's the founder and CEO at InspireOne Technologies, and he continually strives to leverage technology to solve dynamic business problems and build more effective learning solutions for today's workforce. And right now, I'd like to just pass the session on to Shahshin and Kartik. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Vikrant, and a very good afternoon to everyone who's joined us in the midst of what is clearly holiday season. So both Shahshin and I are grateful for everyone who's joined this session. And like Vikrant mentioned, we really look forward to making this not just interactive, but help you address certain questions which you have, especially for your sales enablement plans in 2020. So first up, Shahshin, I'd like to thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
I think it's even more important to thank you, given that today is, as I understand, the year-end closing at Boehringer Ingelheim. So given that you've been able to take time to talk to all at large on sales enablement, it's really great to have you on board, and I'm sure this will be a very interactive session for everybody as well. So as we delve further into today's discussion, I thought let's just quickly lay out the agenda. The broad theme, of course, like Vikrant mentioned, is on how can sales enablement in a digital perspective improve sales performance. And largely, we'd like to today talk about the story of how Boehringer Ingelheim in India was able to successfully leverage digital learning from a sales enablement perspective. I think Shahshin would also share with you that this is obviously an ongoing journey, but the first 12 months have been, I think, par excellence as far as how they have driven sales engagement. So we're going to talk first a little bit about the current state of sales enablement from an industry perspective. And thereafter, we'll delve more specifically into the context that Shahshin and his team were driving at Boehringer Ingelheim. We are also going to ask Shahshin about what were certain challenges that his team faced, not just in enabling the frontline, but also in getting the rest of the sales organization aligned to their agenda. And as you can see, point number 4 is largely about how are the managers involved, and ultimately, how does Shahshin view sales enablement impacting business? Given that it's been 12 months since his team had conceptualized and launched sales enablement from a digital perspective, we're also going to spend some time in the webinar understanding what were certain best practices and things that the team picked up along the way. And lastly, we're just going to spend some time, Shahshin, understanding your views on what do you think is the future for sales enablement. And in between, like Vikrant said, we'd be very happy to field any questions. So if you could just type them in, we'll do our best to answer them and address them in the end. Great. So I think, Shahshin, if we were to just start from a very broad perspective, right? Sales enablement or sales training, as some people continue to define it, is a multiplicity of things, right? I think the best way to think about sales enablement is possibly by understanding what could your customers as an outcome want, and then how does the organization rally around helping the customer achieve its outcomes, right? And I think the way we would also like to define it is to say, from the customers, then how can your business define those outcomes? And ultimately, those outcomes are a function of three things: knowledge transfer, being able to retain what that knowledge is all about, and more importantly, building the confidence then to apply it on the job to see the success. At the heart of it, there are three things that I think any sales or frontline workforce strives to become a master of. One, of course, is product knowledge, having the right process capability. That also has to be backed by selling skills. So it's not enough just to know the product, because today, I think as Accenture research also suggests, almost 60 to 70% of a sales decision is made by customers before they even meet with salespeople. So more than product knowledge, the deftness to handle customer interactions and use those interactions to improve selling skills is ultimately what sales enablement is all about. Do you have any view on how are you seeing sales enablement being defined in organizations?
No, you correctly, with even through the Accenture data, I would just second that. Today, the customer is already ready with the knowledge. He has all the access to information, all sources available to him. So when the rep actually goes and meets him, one really needs to help the customer make a buying decision, and that is where the rep's role is becoming larger than even selling product knowledge anymore.
Right, right. And what's interesting in that, in what you're mentioning, Shahshin, is that there's also, as a result, a proliferation of different platforms that are out there to help a sales rep perform this job. 10 years ago, we practically heard of CRM and ERP being the main drivers of enabling a sales rep. Fast forward to today, you not only have learning management or learning experience platforms, but you also have new age systems in sales like sales intelligence platforms and micro learning platforms like the one you have been using. Clearly, there seems to be an overlap in somewhere what the functionality of each of these do. And on the flip side of it, customers are also looking at saying how can they all converge and talk to one another. Now, if you look at sales enablement, what's interesting is that the industry has also grown and growing for the next 5 years to almost a $2.5 billion industry, right? How are you seeing these different systems talk to one another in the context of what you have currently done?
So we are not there. We are not actually where all systems talk to each other. We have systems like CRM and digital platforms which talk to each other as of now. So when I reach out to my customer through multiple channels, obviously that is the first area which we have been able to address, right, from a customer centricity point of view. However, when we look at the LMS platform or looking at the micro learning platform, they currently none of these talk to the CRM or the sales intelligence platform, and neither the CRM platform talks to, neither the LMS platform talks to the micro learning platform. This is an aspiration or maybe something which we would like to achieve going forward, but as of now, we are not there.
Right, right. And I think that's a fairly authentic and candid view, I feel, because most organizations perhaps echo what you're also saying. I think what's also interesting in this, if you look at the diagram, Shahshin, is the traditional CRM and LMS platforms, I think, continue to have relevance, but they're effectively systems of record and systems of data. And now you're transforming or building a layer above that into what people define as systems of engagement or intelligence. So I don't think, like you're saying, it's a question of either or. It's a question of how can one augment the other, right?
Sure.
Right. Speaking of augmenting, I think sales performance has always been about what and how. And if one was to look at sales enablement, a large part of it was how do you tip the scales in favor of having a balance between the what and how, right? Organizations invariably, and as do managers, focus a disproportionate amount of time on what are we doing to drive or improve revenue? How are we optimizing the product mix? What can we do to capture new opportunities? How can we maximize market coverage, number of meetings? Right? These are all very visible things that any sales manager and leader look at improving. What is your sense on some of the other areas, which is more how do we get the salesperson to improve these things? How do you feel sales enablement can tip the scales a little bit between the what and how?
So the obvious answer lies actually in the fact that when you're looking at building up capabilities of the sales team at various levels, you need to understand, again, going back to your first three, which is the knowledge, the selling skills, and the customer interactions, and making him capable or making her capable in terms of managing these three intricacies actually, which will help him address the what and how.
Right.
The micro and the macro learning platforms allow you to create content, create adequate amount of interventions to ensure that this what and how is addressed on a piece by piece basis, or on a business case by business case basis.
Right, right. And I think that's exactly where the job of sales enablement lies, right? Which is to balance the two and ensure that organizations have a equal focus on the how part in addition to what is the end outcome. So let's transition to the main part of the webinar, Shahshin. There was a context, obviously, at Boehringer Ingelheim about a year ago, where as an organization, you were growing really rapidly. There were some blockbuster products that you were offering to the market, and you had a burgeoning sales team. And I think one question, just one perspective to throw at you was, day on day when your sales reps talk to doctors, talk to different stakeholders, your challenge was becoming bigger and bigger in making sure that each and every one of those interactions were going as per plan, were getting not just standardized, but were building some differentiation for the company. So could you talk a little bit to us about what was your business context 12 months ago in the face of growing an organization? What were you wanting to capture for sales enablement? And how did you come up with this plan for digital learning 12 months ago?
So first and foremost, like you said, actually BI is or Boehringer Ingelheim is a rapidly growing organization. It is both in terms of the value which it brings from the customer, as well as the number of people deployed actually is increasing by in a logarithmic manner, almost on a year basis. And that's one of the key reasons why we needed to look at different forms of training. The second aspect was the fact that when we look at our organization, what we saw is that we have only Boehringer Ingelheim pharma research products. And when I say that, what I mean is that we deliver science to the customer. We deliver science. We would like to deliver science on a timely basis. And one when looks at timely basis today, when the customer has all access to information, you would like your sales team also to be ready and apt in terms of delivering science in a timely manner. So this was one of the first areas which we wanted to address. The second aspect is that when you consider sales teams, and I'm sure that it is not only in pharma, it must be in other industries too. There's a very large difference in between scoring time and playing time. What I mean over here is that people spend almost 10 to 12 hours in travel and in the field. But when looks at actually the amount of time which one gets with the customer, it is hardly anything. In pharma, the time which a customer gives to a rep is anywhere around 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Depends on the capability of the rep and the capability of the company in terms of taking this time. So that is the second aspect. So there's a lot of time which is available to the rep, which can be called as travel time or which can be called as waiting time, which is an area of opportunity which we thought is something which we'll be able to address when we look at digital learning. The third aspect is actually from a perspective when one looks at the today's reps actually, or today's we are a young company, and when I look at my sales reps, they are all the average age is sub 30, and they are the millennials actually, as one would say. They would like empowerment. They would like to deal with challenges on their own. They would like to be left alone most of the time. And that is the reason why we thought that shifting of ownership or giving the rep the empowerment and as well as the accountability of learning back to him would be a good idea. And that is the reason why digital was something which we thought would work for us well. It has worked for us, as one can see from the slide. Actually, we've been one of the fastest growing companies in pharma, if not the fastest, for the last 5 years. We've been the 8th ranked MNC. When you look at the long list over there are many companies over here which have been in India for more than 30, 40 years. But BI with just 7 products actually has been able to make it well. We are also one of the largest companies in the diabetes segment.
Right, and I think this breakthrough speed, like you're saying, is not necessarily only for pharma. I think companies large and small, straddling any industry, would ultimately aspire to have this kind of growth trajectory. So obviously, there's a lot that has been going well at Boehringer Ingelheim. Shahshin, what I think was very interesting of what you said is, if you look at the landscape in which your salespeople sell to doctors, there's a disproportionate scoring time vis-a-vis playing time. And what I hear you say is that how do you maximize those 30 seconds to 2 minutes opportunities by enabling the team was one very big problem statement that your team had to solve for. And then the other thing that you said, of course, is that given the demographic makeup of your business, there was also a certain aspiration or want or need of your sales team through which it had to be met. So is it safe to say you had a lot of constraints within which you had to come up with a solution?
So one would not say that there were constraints, but like you always look out for better and newer opportunities in terms of addressing. That's where the digital learning comes into play. One were always happy with the even the classroom solutions which were there in earlier. However, as I said, the younger group actually to get their attention time or span actually for what the didactic presentations which used to come into place,
right,
or have a 8 to 10 days continuous training module where people have to attend, that would be a challenge actually. The second aspect is that one when looks at even the LMS as a solution actually, where large modules where even with voiceovers are delivered to at the reps tablet, still there is say a 1 or 2 hours module including the voiceover and then passing of those mandatory tests which require a continuous attention from the rep. And whereas these are critical challenges when you look at the current scheme of things, and that's why we needed also a micro learning solution or maybe a bite-sized learning solution, which I would say where 1 to 2 minutes modules are there, where small pieces of learning actually, but important amount of learning with a gamification or with some amount of interest holding for the rep is available, where the person comes in again and again and interacts with the module. And that's why we thought that we moved not only to the small size learning or bite size learning, but also interactive gamification kind of learning where rep can be engaged in a much better manner.
Okay, all right. So to summarize both the business as well as the learning side, Shahshin, what I'm hearing you say is the business side was how do we improve the quality of interactions between a business development manager, as you call a frontline sales guy, and the doctor. And the way to do that was to say, how can we ensure that there is succinct information presented in a more interactive format for the learner, so that it could be engaging for him or her. And by doing so, it can help better replicate that interaction when the doctor gives your team as little as 30 seconds.
So the way to look at it is that bulk of the interaction which the rep has with the doctor is to prepare or create an attention or a interest in a doctor, where and the product knowledge or the process which we were talking about is largely for that small window opportunity which the rep gets to expand and then build it on further. So one says that 30 seconds to 2 minutes call. What we are saying is that it is that one small a ray of hope, or where mind is prepared for a customer and opens out, where the rep gets a 5 minutes call and delivers all the signs, and that is where the whole entire training is focused on. Whether it is classroom, whether it is the LMS learning, or whether it is even the bite-sized learning, what we are focusing on is that preparing the rep in a manner where he is street smart enough, he is say wise enough to not give up that small opportunity which he gets in a customer's chamber.
Right. And one last point on this note, if you can help me understand, Shahshin, is that a lot of companies also aspire to create a business case, if you will, right, for how can sales enablement be improved through digital learning. You've talked about, from a learner's point of view, because they have reduced attention span, how can you engage them in a short time but in a more interactive manner is one important ask. The other thing you obviously said is, if the quality of customer interactions improve, so does the probability of identifying more opportunities and converting them. What else, from your perspective, were important when you had to build this case? Because a large and growing organization as Boehringer Ingelheim is, clearly this wasn't just about your team and the frontline sales team building a buy-in, right? There was also, like you, your other colleagues in the leadership team, there were the sales managers perhaps as well. How was your team able to align all of them to build this business case?
So normally people drive digital initiatives the first time thought about bringing down costs. Okay,
right.
Which I believe is ultimately the outcome of what we did, rather than as a starting of objective. We never actually looked at costs of which is going to bring. But the other way to look at the digital learning and this bite-sized learning is from a perspective that as I said, actually not only the scoring time but the playing time, which was a large opportunity which we thought we would exploit actually to the fullest, and not draw out the rep from the field for other kinds of activities. So when I'm asking him to do an LMS, or when I'm asking him to come and attend a classroom session for 2 or 3 days,
right,
a refresher, I'm drawing him out of the field, which is actually taking away his field time. Actually, it's taking away both his playing and scoring time, which is something which we wanted to address. And once you are able to establish this with the sales managers, with the marketing team, that a rep actually would be able to spend more time in the field, be able to do more calls, ultimately thereby deliver better amount of business, I don't see any challenge in terms of people buying that out.
Okay. And in the industry, what I also understand from you is the scoring time is effectively a function of how much time a doctor gives, which is not in the rep's control as it is.
True.
So the idea was, how do you maximize the time that you have to play, quote unquote, so that you're better prepared when you need to score.
True.
Right. Very interesting. And that brings us, to the next perspective of how we then problem solve to create the right solution, right, Shahshin? So given the demographic that you talked about, and given this business problem, your team found a good way to mix both the form of gaming, right, or use game-based learning as an effective loop to then build a habit within your sales team. One interesting data I'd like to throw for you and for the team is that if you look at downtime on average for people in today's work environment, it doesn't last anywhere between for more than 2 to 5 minutes. And oftentimes it occurs not more than 15 times during the day. So that's really the window of opportunity for your BDMs also to improve their playing time as you will. The other thing which your team did very successfully is also replicate the playing time to simulate what the scoring time was, right? So the time to learn was effectively 2 minutes, which is effectively the time they would have with doctors as well. So we were able to improve their learning outcomes in 2 minutes. The chances were that it would also improve the outcome for scoring. And by creating this loop of learning and gaming, what it enabled your team to do was build a habit for learning with the BDMs, and obviously for them, for the sales enablement team, create a lot of data on the basis of which you could do a lot of correlation with business impact. So this was a very interesting solution that you finally arrived at, if I can say, and feel that it would appropriately address your concern. Were there any reservations when you looked at this solution, or what were the top reasons why you went through this in the first place?
No, like you rightly said, actually the attention span of the rep is in few minutes, and that is the reason why we wanted a bite-sized solution. We also wanted something which will attract him, and that is where the gaming came into play, actually, rather than asking multiple choice questions or actually elaborate questions where people have to make notes and answer them. This is something where while they're having fun, they're learning, and that makes people come again and again on the platform, actually. So it's the content which drives the model rather than the other way around. And you can see the numbers actually, which shows that people come in again and again and play the games, and while they're playing games, actually they're learning. Actually. So that's the better part of learning, that not only are they learning, but they are gaming at the same time. And this will have subsequently also allow us to look at data in terms of how people their habits are, their what kind of games they like, actually, what is the kind of models which we should use going forward. So
right. And I think your team also obviously created a lot of these games to simulate the workplace dynamics that your BDMs go through. I think another very interesting outcome that we were able to think, Shahshin, was that this differentiated way of learning also, I think, better helped your BDMs to empathize with the doctors, right? Because if you look at a standard doctor, he or she must be getting bombarded with multiple companies reaching out for different drugs, molecules, etc. Where besides the formulation, I'm imagining the differentiation sometimes can be very minimal, especially when you look at generics, which may not be your space in the first place. But the point is the form of interaction also has to be differentiated. And I think this way of learning, which your team was able to pioneer, also helped better empathize for the BDM to say, how can now I translate this differentiated form of learning into a differentiated form of selling to the doctors, isn't it?
True. And in fact, we used videos to the fullest to drive this change also. So we used 1-minute videos actually, which were created by the training team, by the medical team, helping the reps actually to answer customer queries. Actually, they were training precisely actually went about showing them how to address the queries, not only what to use as an answer, but how to go about engaging the customer when they are managing those queries.
Right. And this time last year, of course, you and your team were strategizing for the sales plan for 2019-2020. And I know you had a very big and ambitious launch where your entire sales force in Colombo was available. And you had conceptualized Build, which was the form of your micro-learning solution. Talk us a little bit about that. What was the launch like? What were the initial feelers that you got from the workforce?
So we have an annual business conference actually every year, which is normally in the month of January. Digital being the way it is in its importance in India, year 2019 was one of the key drivers of change for BI, which was identified was digital excellence and create a digital savvy. Not only the field force, but digital savvy organization in totality.
Right.
So when one looks at that, actually, it was an apt time. The annual business conference was the time when we launched the micro learning module, which is based on the Master O platform. We call it the Build or the BI Leadership and Development tool.
Right.
And so because we not only use it for the sales team, but we use it across the organization for other initiatives too.
Right. And yeah, I think it was really, I think, a very big momentous launch for the team to talk about the next year and what the company is doing to invest in their enablement. Fast forward from January, Shahshin, of 2019 to April, and your team was successfully able to see a very encouraging adoption of this as a new platform, if it were. And one of the things which I believe your team successfully cracked was not just making this a one-time launch in January, but if you look at the data on the right-hand side, month on month there were new modules, new contests that were being launched in the form of micro learning, which made the entire enablement experience also seem very new and relevant month over month. Talk us a little bit about that. This is enviable data for any company to get to.
So day one at the launch, we had made a conscious decision that the micro learning module would be a pull strategy and not a push strategy. We had the LMS solution, which we believed and which we strongly were driving as a push strategy. It was a part of a mandatory platform. It was used in evaluation of the rep in terms of when we were talking about the capability and the skills, actually it was mentioned in totality.
Right.
But when we looked at this one, we said that we will use content as the driver of traffic to the module. So first and foremost, the training team, and we identified a digital content development team, actually of 2 people, which was developing training modules for both micro learning as well as macro learning. But we had a right guy who understands actually what is the kind of ideas which a field rep identifies it, what you can engage in most with. Those are the kind of ideas which are generated. So bulk of the work which has been done on this module or on this platform is driving good content. Having said that, are we there? No, we are not. Okay, so if I would have said that it is a pull strategy, do we believe that it is completely pull? No, as of now, not. In the initial adoption days, we were actually following up with people, trying to get them onto the platform, make them understand what is the kind of learning modules which are available. And then once we found that people were engaged enough, then they were coming there on their own. And we didn't have to follow up as much. But initially, it was a purely push strategy for the first 6 months or so. The training team and the sales team and the sales leaders were following up with people, asking them to come and onto the platform, complete their tests actually as required, and then we were tracking down dashboards, tracking down information to give them back a feedback that what is the kind of engagement levels were.
Right.
Once we achieved that critical mass, which we thought was somewhere around 70% or so, we reduced our follow-up actually, because we believe that while the macro learning or the LMS module remains a module where there is mandatory requirements, here we would like to engage people and not make them feel that this is not fun-based learning and where people are pushing them to come to the module again and again.
Right, right. So what I hear you say is, one, over a period of time, there was self-learning being driven as a habit, and that too for enablement, which was not mandatory, but which was for essentially skill development. Talk us a little bit about what your team also did, Shahshin, from not just reward and recognition, but how do you build a value proposition for different stakeholders? So from the BDM to the ASM to the sales heads, what was it that your team did? To make this a success in the initial days and even thereafter?
So there is, except for the communication and recognition through flashing the results, there is no rewards which we have associated with this, and we would not like to start actually giving remunerative or rewards for the platform, because again then we are encouraging wrong behavior. We believe that people need to get engaged with the content, they need to see value in what they are doing and come for a good behavior on the platform. So that's the first thing which we tried. The training team needs to actually take all the credit for what they did. So we have a host of trainers which are posted in the regional areas actually. So our largest team being in diabetes, we have a large training team of diabetes of 7 people, and then we have the rest of the people in the other teams too. The training team flashes the fastest people who come onto the platform, encouraging behavior of people to come to get into the chosen lot. That's the first piece. The second one is then, like you see on the slide, actually there is a team where a north zone or a zone actually which is completely completed. Then the trainer and the HO training team flashes the results, actually makes the rest of the people know that there's a 100% engagement from a particular team achieving that kind of an outcome. So, so it's more driven by getting into pushing people to become the very best. So, and for that, even the Mastero platform also offers clearly a dashboard where one can see in which rank a person is vis-a-vis the rest of the country. So people strive for going on to that also as fast as possible.
Right. But that's, I must admit, Shahshin, a very authentic intent which you talked about, which is to say R&R was not driven with the objective of rewarding people for learning, because then that becomes a self-defeating exercise in the first place. Your objective and your team's objective was, how can we create content which itself is so engaging that that becomes the driver for people wanting to learn again and again. And I think that's a very important takeaway for me personally, and I'm sure for our listeners as well, which is to say that driving the right behavior becomes equally an important objective when you're looking at sales enablement through a digital means, as much as choosing the right platform, if you will. Talk us about this data on the right-hand side, Shahshin. This is an interesting outcome that your team was able to uncover, right? That for the vast majority of Salesforce, they were habitually getting used to learning through this digital approach.
So precisely the first three parts are the ones where you have to push the guy to come once onto the platform. Maybe when a new rep also joins BI, the manager takes initiative asking him to interact. Maybe when they are jointly working in the field, the manager shows him the platform, makes him go through it. But once the person actually goes through a series of sessions like what it is shown over here, then you create already a good behavior where people find it engaging enough, and then they start looking at the content. They find a lot of old tests which are there, also quizzes which are available, which they want to complete. So
right, and I think what this data also shows is that the third session of learning through your platform build was effectively the inflection point. And once your team was able to get beyond the third session, then you were able to have a higher probability that the BDM was able to drive learning as a behavior. Now, this type of data is very valuable when you're driving any adoption of new platform, and hence data points like this, how do they help you to ensure that you're making your driven adoption and more intelligent?
Like I said, the sales manager needs to ensure that once he's understood that 8 to 10 times actually, if a person comes onto the platform, looks at different kinds of content which is available, gets himself engages with it, plays that game, answers those questions.
Right.
Once he does that, actually, then the manager also can have some degree of respite that now the person is engaged adequately enough to come on his or her own to ensure that the rest of the tests will be done.
Right. And I think to transition to the result of that, you rightly mentioned that as a result of using this kind of data to drive adoption, your team and the sales managers were able to drastically reduce follow-up from as high as 7 times over a course of 10 to 12 days to as little as once in a day, and that was more than enough to achieve a very high completion rate. So this kind of adoption of a digital platform, I personally believe everyone aspires to get towards, and the corollary of why people don't get to this outcome is one of the biggest reasons why they feel investing in digital platforms may not be a worthwhile investment, right? How do you think about this? How you mentioned it took you 6 months to get here. Do you see this now becoming a way of life, and this kind of result sustaining?
So the results will get sustained on 2 aspects actually. One is the platform and the kind of gamification which it delivers from time to time. So you will always have some degree of resistance and going to the same kind of games again and again. So before the rep becomes restless, we'll need to deliver to him something new on the games too. Having said that, actually the training team also needs to continuously make efforts to deliver different kinds of content. So when I say that, what I mean is that earlier we were doing only some PDF cards actually which were shown 2 or 3 or 5 and then answering questions. Then we went on to the video mode, we went on to now the animation mode, and we'll have to continuously still innovate to get into better and better levels of content, even if it is 1 to 2 minutes only.
Right. And actually, one point which is important to reflect over here, Shahshin, is that you didn't only invest in a platform, right, which had all these functionalities built in and with the objective of improved and updated game-based learning. The other thing that you also did very wisely was invest in the team itself that was going to drive it in terms of upskilling their know-how of how do you create micro-learning content. As I understand, it was an interdisciplinary approach, right? It wasn't just about instructional design. You also helped them understand what is game-based learning all about. You invested in them understanding the importance of psychology, and then using the kind of data points that we've just shown to say how do you improve content and how do you come up with new launches, which I thought was a very refreshed approach of not just taking a new system but backing it up with skills. On that note, we'd love to understand what was the data that your business team was able to get through this adoption. Can you walk us through what the Trajenta business is about and what this data helps your sales managers do?
So this is just one example of different kinds of content which was available to the Trajenta team in terms of bite-sized learning. And when one looks at that, what we are trying to look at, there are 2 aspects to this data. One is when you look at a topic on how to deal with competition, and say we are looking at specific competition, specific area where new data might have come in for a competitor molecule or so, how do you go about addressing it? Similarly, when there is a new guideline like the ESC guideline, so there are different topics which are dealt over here, for which there are different kinds of modules which have been different content which has been delivered. Now, when you look at that, actually, this kind of data, when it comes back, there are 2 aspects which one can infer out of this. One is also the kind of the internal stakeholder, what is the kind of customer feedback which he gets, and what is the kind of interest which he gets generated in. So if I'm looking at the real world experience data, and which shows the highest amount of numbers over here, what one tends to believe from this kind of data is that this is the data which is working well in the customer's chamber, and that is the reason why the rep interacts a little more with it. There is a second aspect to it, and that is that this all are associated with different kinds of gamification, and one looks at that also, one understands that what is the kind of gamification which interests my internal stakeholder most. So the marketing team then actually looks at this data and tries and also understands what is it that they need to deliver further to the rep in terms of various kinds of outcomes which have been done through this kind of learning. So if at all, Carmelina was extremely important to us, and it is possibly one of the biggest clinical studies ever done with Trajenta, and if there is an inadequate amount of engagement, then we need to do an additional intervention in terms of reaching out to our rep.
Right, and how about for the ASM? Can you throw some light on, how do you see this kind of data in the future helping them?
So when I first said about marketing, I actually the amount of same information is available in form of our dashboard to an ASM too, actually. Right. And obviously he can also understand what is the problem which he faces in the marketplace, what is the kind of rep behavior which is there, and tries to address that. And if he believes that there is a inadequate amount of engagement on Carmelina from the rep, and he needs to do an additional intervention, he can get in touch with the training team, or also drive more engagement with the his own team on the gamification on Carmelina to ensure that there is completion, because you want each one of them to have complete knowledge.
Right. And Shahshin, even for your sales training team, that is, this kind of data would have helped them, I'm assuming, also to restructure their classroom training, so that there is, like you're saying, more time spent on maybe helping them understand the importance of the Carmelina study, right? How do you also think this could have and does help your team to improve the application of learning?
So you're looking at it from a many-fold. As I said, gamification, you might have a video as a content, you find out that that is not adequately engaging enough, you might want to change it. You might make an animation format to reach out with the same amount of information actually to refresh the knowledge. So training team obviously looks at this data first. They look at it more in a much better and a much more deeper way to address what future insights come out of that in terms of addressing the training.
Got it. And we also saw, right, that even despite the fact that completion for your team was extremely high, right, at almost 80%, there was a lot of data to showcase that there were salespeople going back to that content despite completing it again and again. What does that tell you as a sales leader? What would you infer from that?
So that one has to actually go a step ahead and try and understand what is it that the rep gets engaged with again and again. So if there is a video in terms of helping him how to address a particular customer's query, and if that is where the rep goes again and again, then one has to understand that this is the query which the rep comes across frequently, and he believes that he needs to become better at addressing that. That is one. The other way to look at it is that as I said, there is a ranking system on Master.o where people try and vie to become into the top of the top list actually, and that is where also people try and go and again get themselves engaged to repeatedly appear till such time they get 100% marks and try to. But in return, what the training team and what the organization gets is that person goes back again to learn actually for anything which he has not been able to answer correctly in the past. So which helps us get better levels of learning.
Got it. So in other words, one data inference from this is increasing the utility value where content is helping solve a particular customer query. And then the second thing is how do you also build mastery of content where even if you've completed it, because this was in the form of game-based learning, you also can see you've not got enough mastery or you've got certain answers wrong. So you go back to reattempt to perfect your score and as a result build that habit. Wonderful. Transitioning to this, Shahshin, having done this for 12 months now and looking at doing this for the next 24 months, your team was also able to generate some insights, again, looking at data, right? Would you like to walk us through, these 4 insights and how do you see this being useful in the future for you?
So when looks at actually the high levels of engagement or high levels of people getting there every week, what we saw is that this can be utilized in the best manner possible. So we need to load more and more different content actually, and at least keep the frequency once a week, because we already have an engaged audience and they're going there once a week, and if they don't find newer content, you will lose the rep actually over a period of time, and the frequency of coming and visiting the app also will go down.
Right.
So that was the first one. We already talked about the fact that people take more attempts, and in terms of even post completion. So we go and see specifically which is the content where the rep goes more often. And like I said, if there is a customer query which a video which helps them address it, then we try and understand. We also understand that way that what is the customer query which is coming more often in the marketplace, and that helps the trading team, marketing team also get ready in terms of making solutions which are to address such kind of customer needs. The bulk of the content is also 2 to 3 minutes, because we found that people do not spend more than 2 to 3 minutes of time. The other aspect is that when people actually access the documents from there, actually on a weekly basis, we try and build a playbook calendar actually accordingly to ensure that weekly updates are given to the Salesforce on the playbook calendar.
Right. What I thought, obviously all these 4 points are very useful for us to look at, considering what kind of insights we can draw. To me, I think the third insight which you have called out is extremely important because of the scoring time that you spoke about as well, right? And if I were to look at it in terms of productivity, Shahshin, a lot of sales leaders a lot of times quip that investing in classroom training means we are taking the person out of the field and into learning. And sometimes you don't see the immediate impact of that, right? Here, what you've been able to do is not take them out of the field, yet make them learn in those 2 to 5 minute windows of opportunity where they're not likely to engage with the customer anyway. So you're helping to maximize the downtime that a rep has. And that is such a great way to say you're converting what was an earlier lost opportunity into sales enablement. And for that many number of people, if your lean team was able to do it for 80% of the time, that is remarkable as a skill set for your team.
So that is normally the time when you're competing with Facebook and Instagram and so on, which otherwise the rep is spending time on, and you're trying to get him back to maybe a little more productive exercise, which will help him in terms of addressing customer needs in a much better manner.
Right. And with these insights came some outcomes, not just for the frontline, but also for the managers and for your business. And let's not forget for your team as well. I think everyone would love to know what have they achieved in the last 12 months.
So we are an organization which does well actually. So which is something which obviously it cannot happen without the BDMs or the reps actually also doing well. We have a very engaged team. We have one of the lowest attrition rates. And over a period of time, what you saw from the data is that people are self-engaged in terms of learning too. When you look at the managers, actually the managers are able to use this solution or this micro learning and in terms of enabling their reps to become better. The dashboards which are there also help us in terms of driving the right behavior and look at the performance of the field force on various training tools which are made available. It has been a good year where we won the industry award, the OPPI award actually for Salesforce excellence. One of the areas which was there over there was also the micro learning actually, but it's a overall composite award for how we have a multi-channel management done by the team, and which is also driven through micro and macro learning initiatives. The BI internally actually has an innovation award, and this year the award was given to the micro learning solutions, the digital learning which we had.
Right. So, fantastic. So that's great, and I think like you mentioned, you have a fairly lean team of 2 people and then some, and you have a fairly ambitious and perhaps demanding sales team, rightfully so. Who number close to 1,000. So if you look at the ratio of the people to enable versus the people to be enabled, it's obviously a very, very big task, and credit to your team for doing such a great job. What were some of the learnings as a result of this, Shahshin? Certain things that you believe you'd like to continue going forward?
Yeah, so these are maybe additional benefits that the new modules when launched before 8 a.m. and after 9 p.m. are more engaging actually. So contents has to be focused on a specific business issue actually, so which is something which is relevant to the rep. So one when looks at the right hand side graph also, one would see that the ones which are more business relevant or the one where content was adequate to be at the maximum amount of engagement. The entire team actually, the marketing, medical, and the sales team. So maybe the other industries also similarly, or the engineering team and the marketing team as well as actually the sales team all have to get engaged into driving the content as well as actually the behavior which you want.
Right.
It is not a single the design actually of the game and the psychology of the rep needs to be understood, and then one needs to study data. We are still a little too early actually. When you're completing 1 year, we don't have any great amount of data to fall back to, but over a period of time, one would assume that we will have a good amount of behavioral data on which we will be able to act upon and drive better engagement.
Okay. And so that's interesting to say that using these different disciplines, you were able to create a differentiated learning experience. and you also found certain timings when you were able to launch new content when the receptivity of the learner or the BDM would be at the highest. And I would imagine, Shahshin, this is a great takeaway for our audience as well, because I don't think this would necessarily change from industry to industry. So what I hear you say is, if we can time new launches of content during the time when a learner is likely to learn, it increases the probability of learning. And then if you create a learning experience which is a function of different disciplines, like the ones you've talked about, it further makes the learning experience or the sales enablement uh, more effective. We've completed 1 year here, Shahshin, as far as sales enablement is concerned. Obviously, no one can necessarily predict how things will evolve in the future. And I'm sure, as your 50% growth rate in CAGR has shown, that from a management point of view and as a leader, you would aspire to continue. Walk us through what for the next maybe year, and if you can, couple of years, would be your wish list, if it were, when it comes to driving sales enablement at Boehringer Ingelheim.
So obviously, when one makes investments, actually one likes to look at the outcome, and trying to look at the effectiveness of the tool would be also to look at the correlation which one has with the sales data. So that is one of the areas which we have not yet put in any amount of effort. But having said that, this is more of a correlation exercise. Actually, we don't want to look at it from a perspective that whether we would like to look at our investments in digital learning or not.
Okay.
We would continue with this exercise actually for a long period of time, even if we are not able to establish immediately a correlation. Okay, so that's one thing which is very sure. But when one looks at various territories and so, actually we might try and see whether there is a correlation. Second is from a perspective that we're looking at maybe in future whether we will be able to engage our sales teams on a video actually and connect with them, because as of now it is more like a content built on the solution. We are not we do not connect with them any which way. So that's the other aspect. And the last aspect is actually from a perspective of the skill gap and how we drive the behavior through the manager. The rest are aspirational. We would like to have the micro and the macro modules talking to each other, maybe get them all converged with the CRM and so on. But it will take some amount of time before we reach there.
Right. I think you've summarized the last point by taking some of the points from the next section as well, which Shahshin talks about also the future of sales enablement. Given the proliferation of platforms, I think organizations, including you, aspire to converge the flow of platform to platform based on what the BDM or salesperson requires. And I think we'll see a lot of that happening in the next couple of years as we go along. So with that, Shahshin, I'd like to thank you for sharing some really wonderful insights of what your team was able to deliver in the last 12 months, and also talk in a very authentic way about what you believe is possible and not possible, not just now, but when people look at sales enablement from a digital point of view. With that, folks, thank you so much for listening. I'd like to perhaps throw it up for the next 2 to 3 minutes for any Q&A, if there are any. And it looks like, Shahshin, one question which someone has asked is, what made the adoption of this solution successful? So you had mentioned initially, right, that it took your team 6 months to drive it. After that, the question from the gentleman is, was there anything unique in the solution that also helped drive this adoption, or was it largely just a push-based approach which your internal team did?
So initially, as I said, it was a push-based approach. Actually, we also talked about the fact that once we found that critical or an inflection point where 8 to 10 times people had got engaged with the solution, we found engagement levels much better. Having said that, we are still not there. I mentioned that that we still follow up and we still flash results. When I say when we flash results, that is more or less another way of looking at a follow-up, where people come to see their name featuring there or their name not featuring there is both a follow-up. But like the earlier days where we were literally actually running exception reports in terms of who are the ones who have not completed and ensured that they went onto the platform, completed their test. That kind of push is no longer done.
Right.
If the guy goes there, it is fine. We just flash the results more than once or twice. Actually, the local training manager, he also has some degree of competitiveness with the rest of the training manager, and he tries to ensure that his region completes first. But having said that, from the head office, we don't push anybody anymore.
Right. And let me, for a second, just put myself in the shoes of a prospective buyer, Shahshin. If I was to ask you, what were certain things when you looked out for a solution that you believe helped you to also reduce the follow-ups? Could you maybe spell out a couple of things?
I didn't get the question. Actually,
so essentially, as part of a functionality or feature set, were there anything as far as the solution is concerned which you felt helped in addition to what your team did?
So we were looking at the kinds of games which are available. One, the kind of dashboards which are available, right. The ability of the team to come and handhold our team and train them. Actually, from a requirement point of view, actually, and because in the initial first 6 months to a year, you look at somebody coming and hand-holding the team, helping them run through the dashboards. Actually, the degree of cooperation which we got from InspireOne, actually, in this first 6 months to 1 year was overwhelming. So that's how we identified the team.
Okay, I think we have just time for one last question, which Shahshin comes on the recent point you made, which I think was also a very authentic statement, that you are not investing in digital learning purely if you see that there is a business correlation. You will see business correlation happen or not happen, but you will continue to stay invested. The question is, how do you take such a bold move, considering companies internally always want to showcase some ROI or business impact?
So first and foremost, I don't know whether the question has come from pharma, but for pharma, what we've seen is that training has never been able to show any great amount of correlation when one brings about that kind of look at different levels of intervention. So when I look at digital learning, it is one more additional form of training.
Right.
And when you look at the degree of correlation, it is whether it is significant or not is something which I would not like to currently bother myself with. As I said, the fact of the matter is that training is important in pharma, which everybody understands. Knowledge is a very important entity for a rep, and so is the window of opportunity to deliver the knowledge being so limited that you want a rep who is street smart enough, who is great at selling skills, opening up the window of opportunity in front of a customer and deliver knowledge. So having said that, when one knows that training is so important, you're just looking at a solution instead of a classroom solution, which is a digital one. Now, obviously the costs are comparatively lower when looks at a digital solution compared to a classroom solution.
Right.
So one doesn't need to really even have two thoughts about the fact that one has to go and invest into a digital model.
Understood. And that's, I think, a good point to perhaps conclude, Shahshin. So thank you again for your time, like I said, in the midst of sales closure. And I'd also like to thank all our attendees from both Shahshin and my behalf for spending your time on what would have probably been either holiday season for you or sales closure like Shahshin. We truly hope that this has been a valuable and insightful session. I can see that there are still certain questions which I apologize, just for the want of time, we will not be able to address during the session, but I assure you that we'll be able to answer that on email to you personally. With that, Vikrant, I'll hand it over to you, and on behalf of Shahshin and myself, we'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a great year ahead.
Yeah, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Shahshin and Kartik. That was a very good session. I hope the attendees had a very good time in the session. As mentioned earlier, the recording of the session will be shared to everyone who was part of the webinar. And if there is anyone who wishes to get the webinar deck that was used, please write to info@inspireone.in, and we would be sharing the deck with you. Again, thanks everyone who was in the session. See you in our future webinars. Thank you.